Hi, I'm in the MMA Disputed Interview Lounge with co-president of Good4UDrinks, Rick DeBanks. How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing pretty good.
All considering the facts that most of the MMA world heard today regarding your drink and the UFC. Can you walk us through what you received from the UFC today regarding your drinks and why it was banned from fighters and sponsorship?
Yeah, well, the typical procedure with Zuffa, the UFC, is that if you have a fighter that you're going to sponsor, what they'll do is the fighters and their agents and their managers will send a sponsorship form over to you that you then need to fill out and fax into the UFC.
Okay.
And I mean, that's fairly standard. We've been doing that now for about 6 months. And there hasn't been too many issues. And today, last night I got word that there might be a problem. So I was speaking with Mike Mersch from the UFC, and he told me late last night. He said, "You know what? We think there may be a conflict now. With Zenergy, which is our drink. We think there might be a conflict, and as a result." We're not going to be able to let you go on any of the fighters' apparel. And the reason behind the conflict is one of our drinks, two of our drinks actually have guarana in it. We have a preload and a calorie butter that have guarana. We actually also have a de-stress drink, though, which is very different from an energy drink, and a recovery drink, which is also very different from an energy drink. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, I asked them, I told them, I said, you know what, reconsider it. Here's some of the facts on our products. So, reconsider. Let me know what you think. And I got an email from him this morning, and basically he said, no, you know what? It's we feel that it's taking share away from Zenergy.
In regards to your drink, you had no other problems before with Shane Carwin and a few other fighters with like Patrick Cote regarding this sponsorship.
No, we've done Todd Duffy, we've done Pat Cote, we've done Gabe Rudiger, we've done Shane Carwin a couple times. There hasn't really been any issues, and I said today, on our website, for us, it's disappointing more than anything. I mean, I'm a fan of the UFC first and foremost, mm-hmm. MMA in general, and particularly the UFC, I'd say. And I mean, it's disappointing for us. It's we invest quite a bit in a given year, on fighter sponsorship. We'll spend, in excess of $100,000, I'd say. So, I mean, all of that now is going to be coming away, not all of that, I shouldn't say, but, a good portion of it now will come away from the UFC and the events, those fighters that are going in those events. For us, like I said, it's disappointing. For the fighters themselves, I think it's a real, it's tough because I think the big mistake from the UFC's point of view is, number one, I don't really see it as a conflict with Zenergy. I mean, they're different products. Mm-hmm. Number two, if they had said, listen, we think there's a conflict, we're losing market share on a product that we own, following UFC 121, you'll no longer be available, then you know what, that's okay. Okay. So that's a score, after UFC 121, we won't be involved in any of that stuff, and we'll move on from there. But, to kind of do it last minute like this, 5 days before the fight, first of all, I mean, we've invested some just in, some of our own promotion around it. Mm-hmm. And for the fighters themselves, at this stage of the game, they're very unlikely that they're going to have somebody, step in and fill that gap for them. It's just too short of notice. I mean, some of them might be able to get something, but it's unlikely, right?
Like you said, for UFC 121, you have Chris Camozzi, Patrick Cote, Matt Hamill, and John Manson, all the fighters that were supposed to be sponsored by Good4U, and suddenly, like you said, it's kind of time constricting and odd that they would do that to you 4 days before a fight night and regarding to sponsorship. So you had to pull everything off from advertisement and sponsorship and shorts regarding your drink, and now the fighters are basically left in limbo trying to gather another sponsor.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to come across as the guy championing, the fighters and all that, but I mean, it is, it's a difficult situation for those guys. And that's really what my issue comes down to, I mean, overall, I'd be the first to say that the UFC is actually really good about letting companies participate in events, and they're all of their brass are fairly accessible. In comparison with a lot of other organizations, they're not going to hide from, and they're not going to just barricade themselves behind a wall of lawyers. Mm-hmm. They're very accessible in that respect. But I just think situations like this, there are fighters that are depending on these sorts of things, to help for a little extra income. I mean, a lot of them don't fight more than 3 times a year at most. So, and especially the ones, that are farther down on the card or just breaking in, it's really makes a big difference for them. So really, my issue really just boils down to the late timing and the fact that I really don't see a conflict. But, I mean, at the end of the day, for the UFC, it's business. Business is business. We'll move on. They'll move on, I'm sure. Like I said, it's just tough on the fighters.
And regarding to the ban, is it a permanent ban, or did you ever ask about possibly looking down the road and possibly getting back in the UFC, or how has the fan reaction been about your drinks and being banned from the UFC?
Well, I mean, the actual reaction we've had has been fantastic. I mean, we may have had as much publicity from being banned as we would have had on the event itself. And I'd say the response from people has been really overwhelming. They're most of the comments I've seen, people are fairly upset about it, mm-hmm. right? Yeah, I mean, you know what? For me, it's business, right? I'm not going to ever say, you know what, we won't work with them, we won't work with them. Somebody would really have to be out of line or vindictive or something like that for me to ever draw that line in the sand. And I really don't see the UFC or Zuffa as being that way. I think it was just, maybe a decision made in haste, or something like that. I don't really see it as anything that was vindictive directly towards us. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if that door's open, fine. And in the meantime, I mean, there are a lot of other sports. There's a lot of other organizations. I follow most of them fairly closely, so I'm aware of them. And you got to be positive, and these things, they create opportunities for other people as well, right?
Exactly. And regarding to the ban, is it just for the fight nights? They can't be on any shorts or shirts or anything? Or is it regarding the UFC in a whole, such as appearances, tweeting about anything in general about the Good For You drinks? How does that ban work?
Well, really, for anything outside of the events itself, Zuffa doesn't really have a whole lot of control over what fighters do. It really centers just around the event. So, I mean, we have a partnership with Shane Carwin, mm-hmm. for example, and that's going to continue. We may not be on his shorts, on fight night, but we work with Shane, across a variety of fields with personal appearances, Twitter. Everybody knows Shane's pretty active on Twitter. So, I mean, there's our relationships with a lot of these guys will continue. It's just, it takes a little bit of the luster off, right, when you're not involved with fight night as well, right?
Mm-hmm. So, and regarding now that UFC is kind of out of the picture for now, what other sports have you been looking at? Can you talk about any other sports that are interested in Good For You drinks and possibly sponsoring a couple athletes?
You know what? I can tell you we're not interested in the Big Four. The NHL. I know you're a big hockey fan. But then living in Chicago, you would be, right? Uh-huh. The NHL, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, they're just, they're really tough organizations to work with, mm-hmm. unless it's at the absolute highest level. So really, I think we're going to, continue to pursue sports on a more grassroots level. And like I said, I mean, there are other organizations out there that, I'm a fan of myself. Strikeforce would probably be exempt from that because they have a deal in place with Rockstar, mm-hmm. which, I mean, might take us down this whole path again. But, Dream is certainly an exciting organization.
Bellator
is another one. They're out there for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you haven't been in contact with any of these other organizations as of yet?
From our end, we have been, for the most part, much more in contact with the fighters and their agents themselves. I mean, as I said on our website, our real strategy is to work with the fighters, because at the end of the day, it's they're the ones that are really, they really create the magic and the powerful association. But I mean, having said that, we wouldn't not work with an organization, any of them really.
Rick, I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come aboard with me to talk about your Good For You drinks getting banned by Zuffa as of latest of today regarding sponsorships for UFC fighters. Again, I do appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me.